Kirby, Kirby, Kirby. That's the name you should know. And if you don't know, then you suck. But now you do know, so you don't suck anymore. The moral of this thrilling tale is that Kirby is awesome. He's cute, he's gluttonous, and he can kill gods with the power of friendship like a magical girl. Kirby is awesome, and his games hold a surprisingly consistent level of quality. Sure, some aren't as good as others, but there's no real, sticker star or brilliant diamond shining pearl level of disaster in this series, which for a 30-year-old franchise is kinda miraculous. But of course, as with all game series, not every game and idea is able to make the cut. And for Kirby, among the many ideas and concepts sent to the wastelands, there are 6 full Kirby games that were fully cancelled after being announced, and in some cases were worked on for quite some time. And today I'm going to take you on a journey through these forgotten lands so we can see a world that could have been. A world where these games weren't cancelled. But they were. And hey, each one of them has something moderately interesting about them, which I find very fascinating. So let's go. To start, these 6 games will be talked about in order of their announcement. To begin is a game which was first surfaced in 1995 called Kid Kirby. It's also probably a fairly well-known title for fans of cancelled media, though not for the game itself. Kid Kirby was being developed by DMA Design, a studio known for creating the Lemmings series, as well as the N64 cult classics Body Harvest and Space Station Silicon Valley. They would eventually be bought by Take-Two Interactive and renamed to Rockstar North, before making their actual mark on the gaming industry with the Grand Theft Auto franchise. Though, technically, the 2D games no one remembers came out in the late 90s, but you get the basic idea here. Obviously, the concept that the GTA guys almost made a Kirby game is remarkably humorous, but that also is likely the only thing many people really know about it. So why don't we talk more about it? Kid Kirby is the only member of the Sinful Six that has never had any real gameplay footage surfaced from it. Instead, most of our info comes from ex-DMA staff who've spoken openly about it. Firstly, there's the story plot, which will focus on Kirby as a kid, hence the title, with the events narrated by an adult Kirby. As you can see, baby Kirby here was more purple than his adult form and has a single strand of hair, which honestly looks extremely disgusting given that it's the same color as his skin. Makes it look more like a cancerous growth is spawning from him. Anyway, the story goes that the Star Rod has, once again, been stolen from the Fountain of Dreams, and Kirby would need to set out on a quest to retrieve it. While there were some familiar characters set to appear, most notably King DDD, named Prince DDD since he was a child, we don't know if he was responsible for all this like in Kirby's Adventure. As far as other characters are concerned, there was Bronto Burts as well as several unknown new enemies, but beyond that there's really not much else known about this story. Regarding gameplay, the game was unbelievably planned to use the SNES mouse of all things. With it, players could control a hand, which would then be used to catapult Kirby across 2D platforming levels. In fact, the game apparently used trajectory lines, much like Dream Course, to help guide your aim. You could also apparently dribble Kirby somewhat, which kinda makes it sound almost like a 2D Glover. There are also power-ups that could change Kirby's form into either a stone or a paper airplane, which I can only assume are going to be the game's equivalent to the copy abilities. There would have been an incredible 120 levels, 60 in the main campaign, and 60 more secret levels, as well as a 2-piece split-screen race mode. As far as the actual concrete development into all of this goes, all that's really surfaced are some sprite sheets, showing Kirby a handful of tile sets and a number of levels, including what appears to be an early design for Fountain of Dreams, which suggests that a decent amount of work was put into the game before the whole thing imploded. This, of course, leads us into the ever-important why of the game's death. According to ex-DMA Mike Daly, Nintendo was simply fed up with the game due to its prolonged dev time. On top of that, the SNES mouse sold very poorly, as one would expect when you look at its repertoire, and the game wasn't really able to be formatted for a normal SNES controller. Overall, I gotta say, I really wish this game came out. It sounds really weird, and I highly doubt that HAL would recognize it as canon, but it also sounds very interesting, and it'd be such an odd game to look back on, I'm sure. In fact, if HAL went full psycho and decided to recognize it as canon, it could have had some insane domino effect on the series' internal lore. But now all we're left with are the sprite sheets. Real shame that. The next one is a fascinating little story about a game that had 2 chances at life before being axed. Kirby Ball 64. This game was first shown as Shoshinkai 95, an event that would later be known as Space World, alongside several other early N64 games, such as Super Mario 64. This game was the very first 3D Kirby project we know to have been developed, and seemed to be some sort of successor to Dream Course. There were 2 modes, one which pit 4 Kirby balls in an arena and tasked them with trying to shove each other out to score points. There was also a maximum tomato that can make you grow larger. The second and far more interesting mode was a race mode, where you could play as either Kirby as a ball or Kirby on an airboard. It was a simple race to the finish, collecting stars and doing tricks to earn points, very similar to the 1080 Degree series. Now, there's a number of things about this game that are highly fascinating. First, take the idea of Kirby on an airboard and save that one for later, trust me. Second, though, is the Battle Royale mode. While it's never been confirmed, it seems the idea of this mode would eventually be rebirthed as Kirby's Dream Buffet. In that game, you get to play as a Kirby ball and have to race or battle against other Kirby balls for points. You even get food that makes you larger, though it's permanent instead of a temporary power-up. It's again never been confirmed that Dream Buffet was a direct reuse of the Kirby ball idea, but I would not at all be surprised to learn that it had some degree of influence on it. Now, remember that airboard that I mentioned? Well, I want you to hold it as it directly relates to our next game, Kirby's Airride, an N64 Kirby sports racing game that Kirby Ball will be directly retooled into. Following the original demo, the devs narrowed their focus down to the snowboard racing mode, and completely removed the Kirby balls and battle mode from the equation. This new game was shown off at E3 1996, with the game being eventually cancelled by 1997 for unknown reasons. Like its Kirby Ball prototype, this game operated much like the 1080 games. Kirby and friends raced on a slope on warp stars and could earn points by performing tricks. There was also multiplayer, the ability to dismount your vehicle and hover, and simulate a health bar in some of the later builds. There's also a screenshot of Kirby with a hat, similar to his yo-yo ability, possibly showing that copy abilities were considered to appear as well. But now to talk about the elephant in the room, the actually released Kirby Airride on GameCube. Very, very distinctly different due to the fact that one is Kirby and the other is Kirby's. One would think that while the N64 version was cancelled, the basic idea was retained and rebuilt into a totally new racing game. However, this apparently is not the case. You know how Sakurai has a super sexy YouTube channel? Well, he made a video about the GameCube Airride, which he was director of, and spoke briefly about these 2 games, saying that while the N64 one didn't directly inspire the GCN one, it did help spark some ideas about what would and wouldn't work in a Kirby racer. Overall, the whole Kirby Ball, Kirby's Airride story I find extremely fascinating, as an instance of a game that would be cancelled, revived, and cancelled again before technically being succeeded by at least 2 totally different games with similar ideas and, in one case, names. Though, of course, this wasn't the last time Kirby would have to go through something like that, but we can get to that much later. Game number 4 is hands down the weirdest one of this lot, and I'd be willing to bet the entire US and all $6 that it is worth that no one here has heard of this. This game was shown off at Space World 2001, and was set to release later that year in September. The big draw of this title was that it was going to be a Game Boy Color game set to be compatible with the Jaguar JN100 sewing machine. Gonna let that one sit for a moment. Alright, buckle up everybody. So, at the start of the new millennium, Nintendo teamed up with, apparently, several manufacturers to produce sewing machines that could connect to a Game Boy Color via the link cable. This could then allow them to be controlled by the console, with it feeding designs into the machine for it to stitch. The whole history of this is a bit beyond the scope of this video, but that's the basic gist of it. Outside of the packaged software, Nintendo also released a Mario game called Mario Family, which had several Mario designs specifically for the machine to sew. As you could guess, Kirby Family was the intended follow-up, the same basic idea but with Kirby art, most of which, all of which, was yoinked directly from Kirby 64's official renders. As you could probably imagine, Mario Family did not sell very well. In fact, its not sell very well-osity was so great that Kirby Family was thrown in the trash. And unlike the other 5 cancelled games in here, no one cried at its funeral, because no one really cared. However, this game also, hilariously, got probably the luckiest break of them all. So, you remember that 2020 Nintendo Giga Leak? The one that confirmed once and for all that Luigi had a model for Mario 64? Well, as part of that massive series of leaks was the Game Boy Color Lot-Check leak, which included a full, playable ROM of Kirby Family. Evidently, the thing was pretty damn far along in development, likely just needing to get the connectivity ironed out before it hit shelves. It has 32 different pieces of artwork, all sourced from Kirby 64, and even has a remix of Planet Popstar for its title theme. It's incredible how this is the Kirby game that survived death. Like, why was it even still in Nintendo's archives? You preserved this, but not the GameCube platformer? What the hell? Up next is Kirby's Tilton Tumble 2, a cancelled sequel to that weird motion control Game Boy Color game, and the only one we know to be a definitive spin-off sequel. This game operated much like Pac-Man Vs. or Zelda Four Swords Adventure, in that it's played using a GBA connected to a GameCube via its link cable. Much like the original Tilton Tumble, the game had you maneuver Kirby through several obstacle courses with a motion-detecting cart in the GBA. However, the levels are now fully 3D rather than the sprite levels of its prequel. I'm not 100% sure if it was a GCN game or a GBA game. Or maybe it was intended to release on GameCube discs with a special motion cart packaged with it? Some other tidbits here is that if Kirby fell off the level, he'd fall from the TV screen to the GBA screen, with Deity helping to launch him back up. Miyamoto has also apparently said that it would let you write programs, such as minigames to the GBA, which I haven't a single clue what the hell that could really ever possibly mean, but more details is better than less details, I guess. This game is rather peculiar in many aspects. It's unknown who was developing it, but it was originally slated to launch in May of 2002 in Japan. However, during E3 that same year, the game was absent, and instead we saw a game that operated basically the exact same way, called Roll-O-Rama. For reasons we have never learned, the Kirby theming was completely yanked out, and replaced with a more generic theme, controlling a simple inanimate marble through 3D environs with the GBA link cable. Sadly, that did not seem to help matters, as the game appears to be quietly cancelled and never really saw the light of day. Now around this time, you're probably getting to see exactly what I was getting to before, about how each of these games have some particularly interesting notes about them specifically. Kid Kirby was being made by the GTA guys, Kirby Family was compatible with a sewing machine and got a release via leak, Tilton Tumble 2 was turned into a generic marble game before its demise, and Kirby Ball became Kirby's Airride before both of those got junked, with a passive influence on future games, mayhaps. It's been a fun ride overall, I must say, lots of fascinating insight, but now it's time for the moment that you've been waiting for. Kirby for Nintendo GameCube. The legendary Kirby game known far and wide by many Nintendo fans, and amazingly enough, one of the most influential games in this series. This game was intended to come out on, of course, the GameCube, and was to be released in 2005, but over the course of many delays and retoolings, it was eventually trashed entirely. It's also the game with the most info about it, so let's begin at the beginning. Reportedly, the game began development in 2000, shortly after Kirby 64. From the limited trailers and screenshots, the gameplay appears very similar to 64, being a 2D platformer set in and around 3D environments. It was apparently set to release shortly after Airride did, with its official announcement coming in November of 2004. E3 2005 would see a great deal of buzz be made, as that was when the game's trailer was released. Said footage demonstrated many more details, such as the ability to play with 4 players, one as Kirby and the rest as helpers. There were several familiar faces, a number of new ones, and most interestingly, a number of enemies that would only end up being found in Airride, with their appearance in Airride likely being to help promote the game. As far as copy abilities go, several were outright seen, and others can be reasonably assumed to be planned due to certain enemies appearing. For example, we never saw the Ice ability, but we did see Chili, and one of the unidentified new enemies uses a moveset that seems to be based on Tornado. Several abilities also got slight redesigns, such as Fire and Cleaning, which more closely resemble their anime incarnations, and Bomb and Stone, which would be the inspiration for their designs in Return to Dreamland onwards. There's also Hammer, which got a totally new hat that we would never actually see in a proper game. Most notably, though, is the Water ability, which made its debut in the anime as part of a contest where viewers could submit copy ability ideas to appear in the show itself. Evidently, they loved this idea/design so much, they wasted no time in getting it actually in the games, and its design even greatly resembles its appearance in the anime, whereas its eventual true debut in Return to Dreamland would heavily redesign it. As far as the game's plot is concerned, we don't know much. It would apparently focus on DDD stealing Kirby's Warp Star, which he then uses to power his giant mech, the DDD Robo. Other than that though, there's not much else known about this game. Thankfully though, due to its infamy and the ultimate fate of it, much concept art and discussion about it has been released. For example, this art from the 20th Anniversary Dream Collection art book, which, despite being grouped in with Meta Knight, isn't art for him at all. It's actually art for a unique Knight character who would have debuted in Kirby GCN. There's also the 20th Anniversary Art Encyclopedia, which has a whole section dedicated to it with some fascinating art. These include art of what looks to be the final boss, as well as the main menu, which given its structure of multiple different boxes, could indicate that it was going to take a multiple stories in one approach, like Superstar. This menu apparently has text indicating a mode called Save Kirby, which I can only assume was an extra mode where you got to play as the helpers as they go to rescue Kirby. With all that said though, let's get to the real juicy thing, the game's post-cancellation. See, the original incarnation of the game, all this nonsense here, was quietly cancelled, and 2 other attempts were made to get the game off the ground, also meaning less than ideal fates. These Lost Kirby games, as they are known, include this game, an untitled adventure which would feature Kirby moving in 3D spaces for the first time. The levels greatly resemble those that would be seen in 3D Kirby Rumble and Blowout Blast, though with the addition of copy abilities. Apparently it was said to be extremely hard, and judging from the full screen proportions of the screenshots, it can be assumed this game was in development for the GameCube, likely from 2006 to mid-2007, judging from investor reports. As such, this one likely lived the shortest life before being cancelled for not meeting HAL's quality standards. The third attempt at getting Kirby GameCube off the ground was a 2D platformer with 3D models in a cel-shaded style. Like the previous attempt, all that remains is some screenshots, though they do show some interesting deets. For example, the background looks very much like a prototype of what would become Cookie Country, and there's a treasure counter in the corner, which suggests a treasure collecting mechanic similar to Squeak Squad, which was the newest mainline game at the time. Super abilities, or at least their predecessors, were also planned to appear before being scrapped and eventually reused in Return to Dreamland. Given its widescreen proportions and various investor reports, the game was likely in development from mid-2007 to 2010, with a release aiming for 2008, then 2009, before finally being shoved into a nebulous TBA category, which I can only assume they did when they realized that what do we do at this point? And that's of course where the game should have died. But wouldn't you know it, this story of course has a happy ending. Around the time of the third cancellation, March of 2010 specifically, Shinya Kumazaki, the current director of Kirby, joined the project, and used his leadership abilities and experience directing Superstar Ultra previously to help get the project back on track. If you want to know more about him and his history with Kirby, go watch this video by Gigi, it's really good. Anyway, using bits and bobs from all three of the different prototypes, the team was able to cobble them together and complete a whole new Kirby game in a year and a half. This game was released in 2011 as Kirby's Return to Dreamland, a glorious return to home consoles and a game that made everyone hope for a proper return to form for the series. And hey, that's not all! Return to Dreamland would in fact serve as the backbone for modern future Kirbys to use from here on out. The next three mainline titles, Triple Deluxe, Plant Robobot, and Star Allies, would all utilize basically the same engine to build their own adventures, taking various pages from Return to Dreamland and others from various other sources. And then of course there's various little elements that seem to have been inspired by these three lost games. For example, HRD3 is a repurposed version of the DDD Robo boss seen in the GCN trailers. Then there's Morpho Knight, who was originally planned to appear in Kirby GameCube before being revived in Star Allies. Speaking of, Star Allies itself was a true return to the ideas of Kirby GameCube, with Kirby and three helpers going on an adventure. And then, you know the 3D games? Well, we eventually got some games seemingly testing the 3D formula, those being 3D Rumble, Blowout Blast, and Battle Royale, with the first two both seemingly being based on this demo directly, and eventually they would lead to us getting Forgotten Land. In fact, even the third prototype cell shading looks shockingly similar to Return to Dreamland Deluxe's graphical style. At this point, all three games effectively have been released, just by offering up their parts to other games in the series. It's like organ harvesting, but, cute and pink. You can probably see with all this why I call this game one of the most revolutionary Kirby games that ever existed. If this game did not get cancelled, we may never have gotten Return to Dreamland as we know it. Hell, given the similar ideas, it's possible Star Allies also wouldn't have existed. Plus, given how we know that an extra mode and Morpho were going to exist in this game, and it was set to release originally well before Superstar Ultra and Galactonite's debut, is it possible that Morpho would have taken Galactonite's original role, and Galacta wouldn't have even existed? And what other events could have been thrown off by this game's release or non-release? Would Kumazaki still be director of the series? Would a 3D Kirby game come out sooner or later? Or even at all? Would Triple Deluxe and Plant Robobot still release as we know them, or be heavily altered, or just be flat out erased? Obviously, these are all purely hypothetical questions, and it's very possible that time would continue as per usual. But I do think it's still very interesting to think about. It's quite possible Kirby could be in a completely different place if any of these three games actually saw a release as they were. And while there are some temporal permutations that may have been better, surely there's also many more that are much worse. And as such, we salute you, Kirby for Nintendo GameCube. You didn't come out, but your death sent ripples through the space-time continuum and helped influence this series more than any of your cancelled compatriots ever could. And for that, we, the Kirby fanbase, will always be thankful. And that covers all of the cancelled Kirby games. Or at least all the ones we know of. I'm sure there's been many more scrapped games that never actually got out of the pre-production phase, but those are the big ones that actually got somewhere through development before getting junked. As a die-hard Kirby fanatic, it was very fun to look back through the series' history and see the lessons Hal learned from these games to make the future of Kirby even better. Really, I freaking love Kirby. I just wanted to make a video about Kirby. Anything at all. I know this topic's been covered at least 3 times, but I don't care. Kirby's awesome. And yeah, this video is extremely short. What of it? Not everything needs to be 20 minutes long, alright? Thank you for watching.